You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 25. We discuss conservation and photojournalism with a special guest. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with me, Rob Reed, and my co-host Josh Galicki. Hey Josh, happy Independence Day.
Hey, thanks, Rob. We had a good alliance some years ago, but we're celebrating our independence from your home country. So we have to do that every
years
year.
ago. We don't hold any grudges. You're okay. And obviously for us, it's election day, so I'm not sure we're going to be celebrating that one. But hey ho, it's an interesting
discussion. It's much more fun than elections.
Yeah. A much lighter subject.
For sure.
Absolutely. So as I alluded to at the start, we're joined by a very special guest. Josh, why don't you do the introduction, seeing as you two guys are fairly local to each other?
Yeah, sure. And I'll let Jay do a formal introduction of himself. Let me just mention to everyone how I found out about Jay. So I've lived in the Washington, D.C. area for many years, but I've been coming out to the Eastern Shore photographing for maybe 15, 16 years. Recently, I moved out here. I've been out here for just under 2 years. And Jay, your name is everywhere. And everybody knows whenever you talk photography on the Eastern Shore, the first name that comes up is Jay Fleming. And I've been wanting to get you on the podcast because, in most of our previous discussions, we haven't really focused in on photojournalism, conservation, telling stories. We've talked a lot about photography, the aesthetic qualities about photography, but less about photojournalism. And even in the world of wildlife photography, the trend seems to be moving towards photojournalism. We see that in many photo contests because of climate change, because of declining amounts of species throughout the planet and so forth. So it's a very important topic, and it's really in vogue right now. And I suspect it'll continue to be the main thing in wildlife photography moving forward, documenting how quickly the planet is changing. So with that, Jay, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we can get right into the discussion.
Yep. Thank you, Josh. So I live in the Chesapeake Bay region. I live in Annapolis, which is a town on the water outside of Washington, D.C., right on the Chesapeake Bay. So I grew up fishing, crabbing. You might not have crabs over in England, but crabs are big over here. But yeah, I grew up documenting what was around me. My dad was a photographer. I would tag along on assignments with him. He worked for National Geographic for probably 25 plus years. And he was constantly having me out with him, tagging along on assignments. And I took an interest in photography when I was about 13. So I got one of his hand-me-down cameras. It was a Nikon N90S, a 35 millimeter film camera. And I would go out and shoot pictures like over his shoulder or, just documenting what we were seeing. And I quickly, I guess you could say, picked up a lot of things. And, just growing up around the photography gave me an exposure to it. And it all developed from there.
Sounds like a pretty good apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Having a parent that works for National Geographic.
At the time, I didn't really I was kind of intimidated of being a photographer. I was kind of scared to take pictures of people. Like I felt uncomfortable with the camera in front of people. So what I was doing was taking mostly wildlife pictures. And when I got my driver's license and a car, I had a roof rack on top of my car, and I would take my kayak everywhere. And that's kind of what got me into, documenting the world around me was wildlife photography. Mm-hmm. So I was constantly driving around, putting the kayak in the water, and the kayak proved to be a incredible platform to take pictures from. For wildlife photography, I was able to get real close to things. I was quiet. I was low to the water. Really a great perspective to shoot from. And I would go all over the Chesapeake Bay region. And, I was shooting film back then, so it was quite a different process than we have now. So we didn't have the instant gratification that we do now. We could, shoot.
And you certainly didn't have 20 frames a second.
No, not at all. So wildlife photography was a lot harder. Just photography in general was a lot harder, and there were fewer photographers out there. So with the advent of digital, I kind of went to town. I just like went wild when I could shoot, go out and shoot like 1,000 pictures, and didn't have the cost of developing the film, didn't have, the time that I had to wait. So that was when I really kind of took off. And that's when I started doing underwater photography. I kind of broadened my scope of work when digital came out, and really just started, diving deep into everything Chesapeake Bay related, really. So I'm very, very focused on this area. Although I love to travel, I try to do a couple trips every winter, because February, March is kind of a bad time to be in Maryland. There's really not a whole lot going on. So I try
the wind never stops. I found that out.
A lot of wind, although our winters have been a lot more mild. We haven't had a good freeze up where the bay would like freeze over in a long time. So, but yeah,
I keep hearing about the winter of 1977. I wasn't around then, but everybody talks about that winter in the bay.
That was the winter when the Chesapeake Bay froze over and people were driving trucks across the bay, like walking on the bay, and like these watermen who were harvesting oysters in the winter were going out with trucks and cutting holes in the ice with chainsaws and hand tonging through the ice. So yeah, we haven't experienced that, but that would be fun to photograph.
I'm not sure you'll get the opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah,
sadly.
It doesn't look like it's trending in that direction, right?
You never know.
It certainly doesn't. I remember looking at sort of old paintings of the Thames in London, with people skating on it, and there's absolutely no way that would happen now. No way. I mean, I think we've had this discussion before, haven't we, Josh? But I remember as a kid, every winter you'd have at least a week or two where some of the local ponds would be frozen over, and you'd be walking over them and messing around and whatever. I mean, don't do it. Don't try this at home, kids.
Yeah.
But now it just never happens. I mean, I think the last time it happened was probably 6 or 7 years ago, I think, and we really don't generally see very much, if any, snow over the winter now. Not in my part of the UK anyway. I live, to the south. So
the one thing I've learned, Rob, from living on the water over here, and even in DC, you're not even exposed to this. Jay, you know this inside and out probably, but wind direction, especially in the wintertime. Yeah. I mean, it changes so many things. Southeast winds, eastern winds, northeaster. I mean, it can devastate certain areas here when it comes to flooding and certain things. And understanding wind direction and weather pattern, that means so much, I think, especially if you're going to go out and shoot on the water. And Jay, you have, I suspect, a lot of experience with that.
I'm constantly, when I go out now, I mean, I don't just shoot for my kayak now. I've graduated to boats. I've got multiple boats, but I still do use my kayak. But I'm constantly looking at the weather before I go out. Number one, to see if it's safe to go out. And number two, to see if the conditions are going to be favorable for the shots that I want to get. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm constantly looking at the weather. And like where you are in Claiborne on the Eastern Shore, you're very exposed to like a northwest wind, which is our prevailing winds in the winter. So you get the brunt of it, and you see a lot of that changing environment with the shorelines eroding. I don't know if your shoreline is hardened by like stone or riprap or whatever, but we suffer from a lot of environmental change on the Chesapeake Bay, in particular on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah, it's interesting. My shoreline's armored; it's riprap, but the property next to me, they have what's called the living shoreline, which it's completely different, and each property impacts each other. Yeah, you're totally right. This past winter, especially, it's been compared to the previous winter. Oh yeah, and the most we had a tide in January, which I think was the highest tide since Hurricane Isabel. And Rob, a lot of people around here on the Eastern Shore, the Hurricane Isabel seemed to be the metric for most people in terms of how bad it can get, right? If it's almost as bad as Isabel, it's bad. If it's worse than Isabel, it's Noah's Ark. That's pretty much how most people seem to define it here. And we had the highest tide, I think, or the second highest tide next to Isabel in January. And it was something. I mean, it opens your eyes in terms of how things are changing and what can change moving forward.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you get those storms in conjunction with high tides, that's the most dangerous time, isn't it? If those planets align, then you're really in trouble. But Jay, you must have seen, a change. I mean, working with people that work on the water, so fishermen and these types of industries, you must have seen in your time documenting this stuff, changes sort of specifically relating to species, which, perhaps indicate the changing environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the species that indicate the changing environment, that's a change that's more gradual here in the Chesapeake Bay. We are getting more like southern species coming up into the Chesapeake Bay that the commercial fishing industry and also recreational fishermen who are out on the water for fun are seeing. Like we're seeing a lot of shrimp, like white shrimp, which is a more southern fishery down in like the Carolinas and Georgia and the Atlantic Ocean. But the biggest change that we've seen is from an invasive species that we have that was introduced by the government, and that's blue catfish. So that's a major thing that's happening right now in Chesapeake Bay, and I personally think that that's the most important story to be told. And I've been doing that for, I think, probably for about 8 years. I've been working on the blue catfish stuff and documenting it gradually and piece by piece. But the blue catfish were first introduced in the 1970s by the state of Virginia as a sport fish. So in response to declining stocks of the striped bass, which is the primary sport fish in Chesapeake Bay, fishermen wanted something to catch, of course. And the state of Virginia introduced blue catfish in the James River, a couple different rivers, like south of Washington, D.C. And they've spread throughout the bay, and they're wreaking havoc on the native ecosystem. They have very few predators. They get to huge sizes, and they're really changing the composition of the native species that we have in the Chesapeake Bay. So they're eating up everything from shellfish like clams. They don't eat oysters. They might, but clams, rockfish, crabs. So all these different species that are important for the ecosystem and also important for the recreational fishing industry, the commercial fishing industry, iconic species that like identify our area.
Yeah. And I've been seeing, Jay, a lot of your photography documenting what local folks are trying to do to fight this. And obviously people are fishing for them. It would seem that they actually taste good, which is maybe a good thing. A lot of people like to eat them. So based on documenting, photographing what's going on, do you have any optimism or hope it can be controlled, or do you think we're past the tipping point on blue catfish?
I think we're past the tipping point of controlling the catfish problem, but I should say, I think we're past the tipping point of like getting rid of the catfish. I think they're here to stay. There's no doubt about that. But if we can suppress their populations and control them and develop things that work for the economy of the area, like developing these commercial fisheries and recreational fisheries that simultaneously help the environment, that would be ideal. Mm-hmm. But through my photography and through my social media presence, I've been spreading the word and getting stuff out there, and actually getting people on the water. So that's kind of a thing about my photography. Like there's a lot of value added pieces to what I do. Like we mentioned how like most of your podcasts are about like, I guess, the composition, like the artistic value of the photography. All that comes into play, and that's all like training that I had when I was younger, just being around it from my father. So I apply the principles of fine art to the storytelling photography and to add like the visual appeal of what I'm doing, but also like add value of telling these stories and getting people engaged and involved in my work.
Yeah.
I think that's,
I mean, I think photography can be so powerful like that, can't it? When I mean, people are visual primarily, and when they see something that tells a story, and that's a real skill in itself, to create a compelling image which immediately basically tells people a story, communicates a message to them. I think that's a real skill, and that's an actual art. in itself. And I've thought for a very, very long time how important that sort of documentary style of photography crossed with a little artistic flair, because I think that's what it needs. I mean, that's, you get those two ingredients together, and I think that's what creates, the really compelling images. I mean, we can all think of things. I mean, images we've talked about before, Josh, on the podcast, images that stick in our mind because they're slightly different, and they've got the power to really change
there's emotion
minds on things. There's a real connection. There's a real emotional response that some images elicit from people, and I think that's such a skill. And sort of looking at some of the work, because obviously Josh mentioned you, and I've looked at your website and the work that you've been doing, and I think that's that's obviously a quality that you have, but you also have this. You seem to have this real connection with the people, of the area as well, which is such an important. It's a skill I don't think you can teach people. It's
There's
like
a trust too, right, Rob? Like you need that trust between your subjects as well, I think, which is unique in and of itself, right, Jay? In terms of the locals here, I mean, these folks have been here for generations and generations and generations. And maybe you could talk about that, Jay. How do you instill trust amongst your subjects, and how does that come out through your photography?
Well, before I was doing photography full time, like between 2013 and 2015, I was working in the field of seafood marketing. So I was working for the state to promote Maryland seafood products. So crabs, fish, oysters, all these different products that these Maryland watermen and seafood processors were selling. I was basically like a marketing associate for the state. So I made a ton of connections through that job. And that really, helped build trust within the community, because I was helping them make a living and helping spread the word about what they were doing and telling their story, which was something that I feel like a lot of these traditional industries, the people who work in them, they just want to go to work. They don't want to, they don't have time to put stuff on Facebook or promote themselves. They just want to work and not be bothered. But having someone like me come along who was really passionate about what they were doing and really loved the product. I mean, I love seafood, and growing up with it, it's seafood's an important part of my life without a doubt. So having that mutual connection with these people helped me establish that trust and those connections, and allowed me to build upon the connections and really branch out to all areas of Maryland and Virginia, and also up and down the East Coast. So, and having that access from those connections is that's incredibly important. I mean, where you can go, like I can go out and basically take pictures of whatever I need to or whatever I want to at any given time.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's having that access. But I think there's a real skill. It's not only having that connection through the job that you're doing and the feeling that people have that you're basically supporting them and their industry. I think that having that human connection with people I think you've either got it or you haven't, and that's a very important part of building trust. It's a bit like when you're looking at portrait photographers, the really good portrait photographers. It's not that they are any more skilled than anybody else with a camera. It's that they are more skilled at getting trust, building trust with their subjects. And if you can build that, then I think that you can certainly communicate a much stronger message through the photography if you have built that trust with somebody, and that certainly comes across in your work. I've seen it,
And I think the body of work of mine that best represents that is what I've done out on Smith Island and Tangier Island. These two little islands are the only offshore islands that are still inhabited in the Chesapeake Bay. So meaning there's no bridge connecting them to the mainland. And I spent 5 years working on a book called Island Life that's all about the communities out there and how these communities are threatened by changing environment like erosion, rising seas. Just the environment out there is incredibly dynamic. I mean, the shorelines are washing away at like a rate of like 15 feet per year in some areas. The number of crabs and fish and seafood that they can harvest is diminishing. So to me, you know, that building the connections out there allowed me to make a 280-page book about a place that, you know, most people would find pretty boring, to be honest with you. So that, you know, a deep dive into the communities. And that's kind of what I've been doing since 2013 with the whole seafood industry.
How many folks live on these islands, Jay? Smith Island and Tangier each. I mean, it's not much. It's in the hundreds, right? I would think.
Yeah, it's in the hundreds. Tangier is approximately 350 people. And Tangier is a lot smaller, like landmass wise, than Smith Island. And Smith Island is probably 200 people in 3 separate communities within the island.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the majority of those people presumably are, you know, in the fishing industry.
You would think, but not anymore. I mean, it's a hard place to be a commercial fisherman because you're limited to where you can sell your products. Whereas people like where Josh lives or where I live, they can go sell their stuff directly to a restaurant or directly to a retailer and get top dollar for it. The people out on Smith Island, Tangier, are limited to like how much money they can make. So it's not, it's they've got all the crap, you know, all the area to work in the world, but they don't have the market.
They haven't got the market.
Well, yeah.
Interesting. And
the number of watermen there has diminished along with the population. I think, you know, some of the people there, they comment on how when they were growing up in like the 60s and the 70s, there were on Smith Island, at least there were about 600 people there. And now it's down to 200 full-time residents. You know, the number of boats has diminished. The, you know, number of vacant houses, dilapidated houses has increased. And there are also a lot of people who are not like islanders who are moving out there because it's a relatively inexpensive place to live. And, you know, in Maryland, you can't get property close to the water for a deal, but you can on Smith Island and Tangier. Sometimes it's, you know, it might be a waterfront property, but sometimes it's in the water. Like when Josh mentioned, you know, we have really high tides. People will get water in their homes at points in time. And so
on a fairly regular basis. Yeah.
People who move out there, they might go out and look at the property when it's a low tide, but then, you know, they experience their first high tide and they're like, I didn't know what I was getting into.
Yeah. And their accents are unique, right, Jay? I mean, they've got, you know, because they've been isolated for so many years, they call it, I think, an Elizabethan accent. So it's really interesting. Rob, you would be interested in this. In terms of
the funny thing is, when you sent me Jay's website link, I went onto it and I watched some of the videos that are linked on there and some of the YouTube stuff, just as a bit of background. And there are a couple of interviews on there with those local people, and they've almost got what I would call a sort of Norfolk twang to them. The sort of, you know, that sort of country English accent. You know, the sort of, I guess people would see it as a sort of a farming type drawl to it. And there were little elements of that which I found quite amusing actually, because it's something that I could relate to. I thought, it was surprising, you know, to have these, just every now and again there would be just this little lilt, this twang to it. You go, I recognize that.
Well, the original people who settled on Smith and Tangier were from the Cornwall area of England. Yeah. And some of those original families are still there.
Yeah.
And
so it is that sort of West Country or Norfolk type. People that live in the UK will know what I'm talking about. That sort of that rounded, almost farming community type accent that you would get in those areas of the UK. So it was very interesting.
And they've got unique ways of talking. Like they do what's called backwards talk, where they'll say something, you know, they'll say something backwards of what they really intend to be saying. Like if there's a beautiful woman walking down the street, which, you know, when tour boats come off, the guys on the island like come out and they're like real excited to look at the women. They'll say something like, "She ain't pretty none," or "Damn, she's fair," stuff like that. They just got funny ways of describing stuff. Or like when I was out on Tangier during the freeze up in 2018, I was palling around with my buddy Cameron Evans, who's a photographer on Tangier, a younger guy, and he's the vice mayor of the island too. And we were talking about the ice out in the bay, and he said something like, "There ain't no ice out there. There's a lot of ice." So they just have fun. You have to experience it to really understand.
Can get confusing.
Yeah. And I tell people in my presentations and stuff, I said, once I start doing backwards talk and start talking like that, it's time for me to go back to Annapolis. I've been out on the island too long.
Absolutely.
But I would spend up to I think the longest stint that I had out there was 6 weeks on Smith Island.
That's a long time. And there's some great wildlife around there, Jay, too. I know
wildlife.
Brown pelicans nest there, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that might be the northernmost nesting point for brown pelicans in the United States, maybe, right? Or at least on the East Coast, I should say.
On the East Coast, I would say, but they're kind of moving around a little bit. Every year they kind of shift their nesting locations, but the islands in the Chesapeake Bay and Tangier Sound, that I would say that's the most northern extent of their breeding range. But what I did out there, what do you do for 6 weeks on an island but shoot pictures? How would a photographer like me make a living out there? So what I started doing was taking workshops out there. So I got my captain's license to operate my boat. I got a bunch of people on the island to basically help me with these workshops. So I basically hired watermen. I hired people on the island to cook. I made those connections that would allow me to bring photographers out there and keep, entertain and teach these photographers different things for 3 days. So I just got back from a 4-week stint out on Smith Island where I did 7 multiple day workshops. So that's really how I justified being out there and how I, basically did my book. I mean, when I was working on the book, it was all work that I was doing and not getting paid for at the time. But the workshops allowed me to do that, allowed me to still pay my bills and shoot these pictures that were basically an investment into my future.
A lot of folks that go on workshops that I know, it's mostly for wildlife. These workshops, certainly they include wildlife, but it's more than that. Can you talk a little bit about what you try to focus in these workshops to make what you do unique to other photographers who maybe just want to focus on the wildlife or one thing or another?
Yeah, so these workshops are pretty diverse in terms of what we cover. Just like my body of work is pretty diverse in terms of covering like the culture, fishing, wildlife, landscape. So we cover all that on these islands. So people get to meet like the real islanders. They get to meet them, and we go into people's homes and take pictures. Like for instance, where we do a thing where we photograph a woman making a cake. So the Smith Island cake it basically puts Smith Island on the map.
Yeah, so I've got one downstairs in the fridge. It's really good.
They are awesome. So back in 2008, the Smith Island cake was designated as the Maryland State Dessert to try to, provide some sort of boost for the economy on Smith Island. So provide, an opportunity for these cottage industries to make a living out there, because they were struggling. The crabbing industry, the fishing industry, like I mentioned before, it's diminishing and changing. So these cakes provide an opportunity for people to sell them out of their homes, to ship them all over the country. And, that's an important part of the culture. So we document that during the trip. So I have a woman, basically hire a woman on the island to cook a cake for us. And we photograph her cooking a cake in her house. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but, it's a challenge for the photographers because the lighting's tough. And, a lot of people on my workshops, like you mentioned, most people want to shoot wildlife. So it kind of forces people to get out of their comfort zone and, interact with people and photograph them. So it's a good exercise. And we also do similar stuff with the fishermen, where we go into their crab houses and, we photograph them handling the crabs and soft shell crabs, which is something that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it's a local delicacy in the Chesapeake Bay region. And we also occasionally I'll let people get on the workboats with the watermen. So we photograph the fishing activities from my boat. And then also sometimes people will get on the boat with the watermen to photograph that. So really just providing a diverse array of subjects for people to photograph. So
I think that's really good, actually, to be able to take people that their main focus, if you like, pardon the pun, is wildlife, but sort of throw them into other situations to give them a few more challenges that they don't generally in genres that they don't generally shoot in, like those sort of people portraits, those, those documentary style images of the boats and the fishermen and that sort of thing. I think, as photographers, it's always good for us to step out of our comfort zone, go and experience something else, because you never know, there may well be a few ideas that are generated by doing something like that, which you can then transport, if you like, and use within your own wildlife photography. Because we will sort of tend to get stuck in a bit of a rut at times, doing things in the same way. And I guess, my photography in particular, I know Josh is the same, is over the last few years, it's taken a very artistic route, and it's quite difficult to come up with new ways and of shooting the same old subjects. We kind of touched on this in the last podcast that we did. So to take people out of their comfort zones, get them photographing other subjects, I think is a fantastic way of getting some creative juices flowing in the area that they tend to shoot the most.
Yeah, and just the experience of doing it too. I mean, some of those experiences, like I always ask my participants what they enjoy most about the trip, and some of them will mention the cake making demonstration. They may have come out to Smith Island to photograph the pelican nesting colony, but they enjoyed the cakes the most because it was,
was it the making of them or the eating of them though, Jay? That's the thing.
True. Yeah, we do have. I usually have 2 cakes that people can munch on throughout the trip. But yeah, and I think kind of putting people in that position, to step outside of their comfort zone. That's how people become better photographers. That's how I became a better photographer, was forcing myself to do it. Even if I wasn't comfortable with it, just forcing myself to do it. And, with my job, I work for myself. So nobody's pushing me to do anything except for myself, unless I'm hired on a shoot. But, I have to motivate myself to get out. And for me on these workshops, I'm like as much a teacher as I am like a motivator or a coach. So I put people into positions to get these pictures. And then that's how they really learn the best. That's how I've learned the best, is just through experiencing it.
And pushing is important, right, Jay? I mean, when it comes to motivating people, because you were talking earlier about film to digital and how that's really democratized photography. There's, way more photographers out there than there's ever been, right? And so many people just keep taking the same images over and over again, and they either get bored or they don't progress, right? So there's always those flashpoints, I think, where people want to improve, and sometimes they need that motivation, whether it's on a workshop, learning from somebody like you, or trying to figure out, how do I separate my photography from other photographers out there? And it's difficult because there's so many people, with social media and everything else.
And people see other people's images and they want to emulate somebody else's style. And instead of finding their own voice in photography, finding their own style. So like my goal from the workshops is to kind of inspire people to use the techniques that they've learned from me and the techniques that they've seen me use, and apply them to their own ideas and their own concepts.
Yeah, and presumably give them a reason for doing this. I mean, if we're talking about conservation and changing people's minds, when you realize how powerful some of these images can be, that's got to be pretty compelling from a personal point of view and from a development point of view, to giving you a why. I mean, I'm constantly asking myself this question when I'm out taking photographs. Why are you why are you shooting this picture? And there are a number of answers to that, obviously, depending on the situation that you find yourself in. But I think, that's a really important question that photographers don't ask themselves enough, is when you've got something in front of your lens and you're composing a photograph, why are you taking that photograph? Is it for self-gratification? Are you trying to create, are you trying to tell somebody a story, or create a message on something? Are you trying to take a piece of fine art? Are you trying to take a picture that you can sell commercially? What is your why? And I think that's a question that we don't ask ourselves enough.
So one of the pictures that I have people take on the trips to Smith Island and Tangier is we go to a shoreline that's washing away. And I typically take people to the northern end of Tangier Island, which is the area of the island that I mentioned. eroding at like a rate of like 15 feet a year. So this island, it's washing away at a rate of 15 feet per year. So that's pretty dramatic. The first time I went out there, there was a cemetery, there was a house out on that portion of the island. All of it has washed into the water. And what I tell people is that, like this might seem boring. We're just taking a picture of an eroding shoreline. But if you go back year after year and document that change, that's what creates a compelling story. And that's what creates a compelling like message about the picture that you're taking.
Yeah.
So it's
one
not
of your one of your images that really struck me was the wooden house and the reflection in the water, and the story behind that, because there's a video on your website about that, and the way that house isn't there anymore. But that really told a story, and I think your explanation of that was the reflection was the house sort of melting away into the water almost. It was a fantastic picture.
House washing away, and for a reflection of what it once used to be. So that particular island, Holland Island, that's included in my book as well. It had a community on it at one point. There were like 70 homes there, and I think there were 370 people living there. And after a while, like the community saw the writing on the wall, the island just kept washing away. So people dismantled almost all the homes. They dismantled a church, a schoolhouse, stores. They dismantled the buildings and moved them to the mainland. But one house was left out there, and that's the last house on Holland Island. And that house fell in the water about 6 months after I photographed it in 2010. So that kind of
became some time ago already. That's 14 years ago. Wow.
Yeah, that kind of became that's one of my most iconic images, and it's also kind of a piece of history because it'll never be taken again. It was one of the last pictures that was ever taken of that house.
Wow. So, I would imagine, is Holland Island completely underwater now, Jay? Is that?
No, there's Holland Island. Parts of it are completely gone, but the island's just washing away. It's in the middle of the bay. It's exposed in all directions to erosion. So anytime the wind blows, anytime the waves are washing up against the shoreline, pieces of that island you can visibly see pieces of that island falling into the water. Wow. And I would guarantee that within my lifetime, Holland Island will be gone. And I'm going to continue to go out there and document that. So I've been going out there since 2010, like I mentioned. And, I go out there every couple of years. I'll fly my drone up, take an aerial picture of the island. The drone is a great perspective to document that erosion because you get to see, like, you can really see the change dramatically. And if you shoot the same picture from the same angle multiple years in a row, I mean, it sounds boring, but I think that's the most effective way to show that type of change.
Yeah. No, that really is a time lapse photograph, isn't it?
Yeah, like years apart. I mean, I think the last aerial that I have of Holland Island was in 2020. So to go back and show it 4 or 5 years later, you'll see a dramatic change. The changes aren't happening overnight. It's
When you look to go out and photograph in these areas, do you have a sort of set process that you've already thought about, or do you generally feel something when you're out in a location? Do you go out with sort of preconceived ideas, or do you just do it on the fly?
It's a mix of both. I mean, sometimes I'll go out with an image in mind, specific shot that I want to get. Like, I'll go back out to Holland Island soon, and I'll want that exact same aerial. So I'll try to go out when the light is consistent with what it was when I first shot the picture, and then, execute that. But I'll go out and constantly just see stuff along the way that, is different. And, I've been going out to these same areas again and again and again. So I don't want to keep shooting the same picture. So for me, it becomes harder and harder to shoot unique pictures in these locations. But, I can still like spend a lot of time looking for them. Like, for instance, on Smith Island this year, I had a really incredible encounter with a barn owl. And I've been going out to Smith for like 13 years at this point. No, excuse me, 15 years. And I've never seen a barn owl up close. But when I was there in June, I got like very close to one and got an awesome shot. I
That's
had an
amazing.
awesome encounter with it. So, I'm constantly surprised at what I see out there. And that's kind of what keeps me going in these same locations. But there,
Barn owls, I think, are endangered in Maryland too. I mean, the last one I saw was in Calvert County years ago. To see a barn owl is pretty rare. Poplar Island, I think, may have a few, from what I understand.
there's a handful around, and the state is putting up nesting boxes all over to kind of like try to help encourage them to nest and like build nesting habitat for them. So
Yeah.
that picture actually is kind of cool. I put it on Facebook, and I've got a bunch of people from Maryland DNR and state and federal organizations that follow that, and they want to put a nesting box up on Smith Island now after seeing that picture.
Now that is a really good
Cool.
example, I think, of what we were talking about, and how powerful photography can be. That one photograph or that series of photographs can basically make that, or certainly contribute to something like that happening. Money going in to a cause. Nest boxes going up. People paying attention to the fact that actually, well, this is rare to see this species. It's declining in this area. Oh, we better do something about helping them out here. Let's put some money into nest boxes. And I think that demonstrates the power of photography from a conservation point of view. And it's something that I've been, very, very passionate about with, the sort of competitions that I've been involved with over the last few years. I said, you may well know, I was one of the founding directors of Bird Photographer of the Year, what must be 10 or more years ago now. And I was involved in running that competition for 5 years. And more recently with wild art, it's one of the things that I think, particularly with the artistic style of photography, or that documentary style of photography, which I consider to be, equally as artistic as some of the more beautiful images that we see in some of the, some of the artistic, some of the artistic things that people do with their images. I think that telling a story, it can be equally compelling in an artistic way, and it just goes to show the power of the image. I think we were talking about this, Josh, weren't we? No, I was talking to somebody else about this today. I was actually chatting with Michael Sneddick, who's been on the podcast before and is one of the wild art judges. I actually caught up with him earlier today, and we were talking about the Roadrunner image in Bird Photographer of the Year a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
that won.
Yeah.
And how that
He was an ILCP guy. I forgot the photographer's name. He's from Mexico.
Alejandro Prieto. It's the second time he's won it, I think.
Yeah.
He won the second year with flamingos, the picture of the flamingos. And yeah, he's based in Mexico. And it was a picture of obviously the Trump wall, basically, and the Roadrunner that was couldn't cross the wall. So it was, it was a real storytelling image, and I think very, very powerful because of it. And it's telling a story, and I think images like that are so important with with basic communicating a story.
With wildlife photography, it's really hard to do that because there are so many wildlife photographers out there. I mean, like you said, the majority of people who get cameras, like, I've got retired people who come out on my trips, and retired lawyers, retired doctors who, money's not an object. They'll go buy the nice 600 f4 800 millimeter lens, and they'll be able to get these incredible bird shots. But like you mentioned, it's like, why are you taking a picture of a pelican? What story are you trying to tell through that picture? You just want to take a nice picture of a pelican, but there are thousands and thousands of just bird portraits out there, like bird on a stick pictures. That's what, some people joke about that. It's like, what is it?
We've joked about it, haven't we, Josh?
we just did a podcast on cliches. That was one of them. So
it's like, it's sharp, it's well exposed, it's a bird. That's great. But what can you tell from that picture? Like, what's the verb in that picture? Yeah. So I constantly try to tell myself that, and try to tell my workshop students that. It's like, your work has to have a verb in it. There has to be some sort of action going on, or some story that you can tell from that picture. Otherwise, it's just a nice picture. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think photography should have more of a meaning than just pretty pictures.
Yeah.
I've never heard it described that way before.
Yeah.
I think that's inspired, actually. That's inspired. So, yeah, people listening to this should remember what
Yeah.
Jay's just said, because I think
95% of photographers aren't thinking about that, maybe even higher, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to why are you taking this image, they're not thinking about that.
Well, I'll get caught up in the moment when I'm shooting pictures on Smith Island, like with the pelicans. I mean, I take people to places where I can pull the boat right up to the shoreline, and we're within like 15 feet of these pelicans that are sitting on a nest with their chicks. I mean, it's incredible. Like it's, and there's nobody else out there. It's like I'm the only person out there doing that. And I'll take thousands of pictures in a night, and I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Like I have like probably 1 million frames of pelicans, and that's not an exaggeration. Like I said, I've been going out there for 15 years, but I get caught up in that moment, and I end up never even touching those pictures. I've got pictures of birds that I haven't even touched, but when I do get one, like the perfect shot of like a chick being fed, or like, adult, like interacting with the chicks, that to me, that makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to take a picture to take a picture.
Yeah, I mean, you can think of other examples. Maybe working with gannets, for example, which Josh and I did last year when we went to Shetland.
I saw that. I'm super jealous of Josh's shot of the two gannets underwater with their boats crossing.
Yeah.
I need to go.
Another one of our cliches, actually.
Yeah, that's been a big thing, but the setup that we had was bizarre too. It was on a pole. We had a trigger camera, and
cool.
it was wild.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic thing to go and do, as we've talked about before. But I think one of my favorite shots from that was, and Josh, you'd have seen this picture. I haven't shared it on social media because I'm kind of saving it, but I've got a close up of two birds swimming, basically, and they're coming together, and one's got its beak open, and the other head is behind the other bird's behind it, but the head's sort of in the mouth, as it were. But on the bottom mandible of the beak is an old fishing net, which is basically holding the beak open, and is this great big lump of it underneath the gannet. And that, to me, is what that picture is all about. It's about that man-made element in the scene. You've got these two beautiful birds, but then you've got this great big lump of fishing net, and that to me is telling the story.
Yeah, absolutely. How like the birds, the derelict fishing gear can affect wildlife.
Yeah,
like
and how many of these birds are being killed every year?
Yeah.
I mean, you could. I mean, I guess there are situations where you could photograph dead and drowned birds, in situ, but I don't think that's going to have as much impact generally as that type of image. I think when people are shocked by those images, but to have two birds that's still alive, but you've still got that element, and that element of I guess sort of danger in terms of their the birds themselves, that element, that
struggle of the bird to survive, and the fact that it's still surviving with that gear hung up in it. There was a pelican out where we were shooting at the nesting colony, and I nicknamed him Rattle Trap because it had a fishing lure like under its wing. It had we call them rattle traps. It's like a hard plastic lure with two treble hooks. So this bird had 6 hooks under its wing, and it was flying around. And these lures, they rattle, they shake, they make a lot of noise. So every time this bird passed us, it would rattle, and we knew it was coming.
Wow.
The bird was around all summer, and we were able to photograph the bird with that fishing lure in its wing. And another instance of documenting how humans and the environment interact. There were a couple pelican nests that were built on top of old crab pots that had washed up on the shoreline. So showing that human interaction with wildlife, I think you might want to. A lot of wildlife photographers want to take pictures where it looks undisturbed by man. It lacks that human element. But I think showing the pictures with that human element are much more powerful, because we have disrupted the ecosystem all over the world in every possible way. So the wildlife is just adapting to live with us now. So
yeah, and that's the narrative, isn't it? That's the most powerful narrative I think you can perhaps use. I mean, we've talked about this image before, but the seahorse with the cotton bud, and we've all seen that image, and how powerful things like that can be. It's generally that human element, because we're all talking about the climate disaster, how much effect we're having on the planet, but these photographs have the power to change attitudes, and what that particular example certainly did. And I can't think off the top of my head now, but there are certainly others. I mean, your barn owl picture, for example, I guess on a smaller scale, but still equally as important. And there'll be other examples of that.
At some point in time, I want to do another book on wildlife in the Chesapeake Bay region. So all the wildlife that's tied to the water in the entire watershed of Chesapeake Bay. So that's 64,000 square mile watershed. That's going to be a big undertaking, but I want to show how, the wildlife is adapting to the man-made changes in the environment. And one picture that I constantly think of, and I see it every time I'm driving, is all these ospreys that we have nesting on the like overhanging signs on the highway. So there's these ospreys, which, are beautiful birds. We call them fish hawks here. I don't know if you have them over in England.
Yeah, but, we got the osprey. Yeah,
I think they're actually all over the world. But we have them nesting on these overhanging signs, and I just think that'd be a really cool picture of an osprey with like feeding its chicks with the highway in the background, or like a nest in the middle of a parking lot or something like that, to show how these birds are so adaptable and how what they have to do to survive.
Yeah. Do you remember that picture of I think it might have been blackbirds or something nesting in the traffic light, Josh? In I think it was in bird photography of the year.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's a pretty cool image. And then there was another one of a kingfisher on a metal railing with bus tail lights in the background. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All these sort of those are the type of things that really do tell a story. And I think if you then using, and then we're just talking about individual images here, but if you've got a series of connected images telling a much bigger story, wow, that's very powerful.
There's an island. It's an old fort that was built during the Civil War in the middle of the Patapsco River, just outside of Baltimore, like right where the Key Bridge collapsed recently. I'm sure everybody around the world heard about that. Hitting the bridge, and the bridge just falling down. There's an old fort there. It's called Fort Carroll, and it's completely abandoned. Nature has kind of taken over the fort. There's trees growing in there, and there's probably 1,000 cormorants nesting in there, along with a lot of other birds. But I was able to get access to that fort and go in the fort to see what was nesting in there. And every nest that I found, every cormorant nest that I found, was the nesting material that they used was a mix of like trash and actual natural like nesting material, so sticks, twigs, and grass and stuff like that. But some of these nests were like 80% trash.
Wow.
So just showing a natural nest, a picture like that is not nearly as powerful as something like a nest made out of mylar balloons. That's the kind of stuff that has the ability to help people like persuade change and make changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one thing too, living, on the water now. I didn't realize balloons. I picked them up all the time, and I just never knew. I mean, I knew they were a problem, but I didn't know how pervasive they were. I picked them up all the time. Yeah, it's amazing. I was just down in outside of Wachapreague and some of the islands there, Hog Island.
Where I am
now. Are you down? Okay, yeah. And there's balloons everywhere down there, and it kind of blew my mind. But
I mean, you're out on some of these remote beaches, like where you would think that you don't see people for miles. Another boat, people, whatever, and you find a ton of trash. I mean, this stuff washes up from everywhere. Like after, like my Smith Island workshops or after high school graduations, we found a ton of like congrats grad balloons and like Mother's Day balloons and all this crap all over the beaches. And some of the workshop students are like, all right, well, the light's kind of harsh now. We're just gonna pick up trash.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I always try to leave the beach better than I found it.
Yeah.
So I'll constantly take trash out. And this winter, when there was nothing to shoot, I was a little bored, so I try to improve the environments where I work and improve my office. I wrangled up a bunch of people, and we literally filled my boat with trash. I've got a 22-foot center console, and we picked up tires, balloons, countless bottles, and we had my boat mounded over with trash.
That's
Yeah,
great. I
and
mean, when we get the high tides on my property, the lower part it's marshy down there. So, I mean, mostly shotgun shells. That's a big one.
Yeah,
Barbie dolls, comb. I mean, I've got a whole like Flotsam and Jetsam museum now in
you could
terms of.
start like a sculpture exhibit.
I could
and
definitely.
it's amazing how far this stuff travels as well. I'm
Yeah.
reading I picked up a book in Shetland written by a local woman, basically it's all about beachcombing and her search for a sea bean, one of these sort of tropical seed pods, um, having traveled all the way across the Atlantic, and ended up, in Shetland. And she's picking, she was saying that in her book that she's picking up the tags for the lobster pots, from America all the time, and she got this great big glass jar collection of them, and she's getting in touch with some of these people that, some of the actual fishermen where these things originated from, because you can all trace them all back. They've all got individual numbers, and they're all from Maine and places like this, and they're all coming over. But it's just amazing the amount of, how far some of this stuff has traveled and where it's come from. And because the majority of what we're talking about is plastics, and it's not breaking down, and it's tremendously long lived, this stuff.
Yeah.
And some of it's from the 90s. She's picking some tags that have been in the sea for 30 years nearly.
There's some incredibly powerful pictures that I've seen from the South Pacific of these remote, like, albatross nesting colonies. You may have seen them before, but the adult albatrosses are actually feeding their chicks plastic.
Yeah.
And the chicks are all dying. And the pictures of the chicks like decomposing with the plastic in their stomachs. I mean, those are pictures that have stuck with me for a long time. I don't know who took them. I don't know exactly where they were taken, but it's just incredibly sad to see something like that. But it's important, that using the photography as an educational tool is incredibly important, because hopefully we can inspire change.
That's a familiar story with a lot of seabird populations.
Midway Island, I've seen a lot of those pictures with the albatross out, but
they're doing a similar thing. I think they're doing a study of fulmar as well. This was in this book too, and it's something shocking. Like, it's well over 80% of the fulmars that have. There's a guy who I think he's based in Scandinavia somewhere, who's basically, cutting these birds up and analyzing the contents of their stomachs, and well over 80% of the birds have got. That's the estimate now. Well over 80% of the fulmar population has got plastic in their stomach to some degree, and some of them have got amazing quantities that you wonder how they've survived for so long with it in their stomachs. So to try and create images that communicate that story in a way that people can relate to, I think that could be very, very powerful.
I did something similar with the blue catfish that we have in Chesapeake Bay, where I actually went to a fish processing plant where they're filleting these blue catfish. This plant does like 20,000 pounds of catfish a day, which might seem like a lot, but it's really, we need to have a lot more processed than that. But they allowed me access to cut the fish stomachs open and examine what they were eating. So really show the viewers of my pictures why the blue catfish are a problem. So I cut open the stomach contents, which is a terrible, terrible job. I had to put like Vicks vapor rub under my nose. And I mean, catfish will eat anything. They've got incredibly strong stomachs, and I've got a weak nose. But yeah, I mean, I never thought that I'd be sitting in a fish processing plant at like 3 a.m. in the morning, cutting fish stomachs open to like see what they're eating. But that picture from that series of the blue catfish work that I did, I think that became the most powerful image from that grouping, because it really showed people why these invasive species of catfish are a problem, because they're eating up everything that we've known in the bay. I mean, they're eating up the crabs that people love. They're eating up the rockfish that people love to catch. And that picture of the stomach contents, doing that in a artistically tasteful way, putting the contents on like a nice white background, clean background, so it looked like a very scientific shot, but it really conveyed that message. So
yeah, and that's the skill, isn't it? It's doing it in a way that people aren't repulsed by. You've got to engage. Well, you've got to engage them, haven't you? And that's a real skill. So,
the scratch and sniff version of that print is limited edition.
I think it's imprinted on your brain, isn't it? That smell every time you see that image.
You can't unsmell that.
Jay, if I could just pivot really quickly to something else you were talking about, workshop students, retired doctors, lawyers, and so forth, and they go out and they buy the gear, right? They buy the best gear, 600. From your standpoint, and you've been doing this a long time, how important is gear really? We have a lot of folks, in my opinion, especially in the wildlife photography community, they get the best gear and they think automatically my pictures are going to be exponentially better. What's your take on that?
I mean, you can take a great picture with just a phone. It just, I had a Nikon D300 for the longest time. When there was like an 850 out, I was still shooting with the Nikon D300. I did a whole book with the Nikon D300 that's still selling today. But I do think gear is very important. I think especially with bird photography, having like a high frame rate and having big lenses where you're not constantly like cropping in your image and forgetting wildlife shots from a distance. Gear is incredibly important. Sharp, like prime lenses. I've got the Nikon 800 millimeter Z lens with the Z9. I mean, that's like a killer combo for shooting birds.
I've got a Z9 and well, Josh knows I love it.
Once again, I'm the only Canon person in the conversation. I'm more than minority.
What does that tell you, Josh?
I know.
I would say my workshop students are a mix of it's probably like 40% Canon, 60% Nikon, and then there's other cameras thrown in the mix, but it's mostly Canon and Nikon. And I will say the mirrorless cameras for shooting wildlife are unreal with how fast they are, the frame rate, and the focusing on them. I mean, I would never go back to shooting wildlife with my D850 after using a Z9. I can shoot.
Do you know what? I've on Tuesday, I met up with another one of the wild art judges, Victoria Hillman, and we were just going to shoot orchids. We just went out and that was the plan. But so I had the Z9, but I coupled that with the 2-500, which is one of my favorite lenses for photographing flowers, funnily enough. But anyway, but I had the 850, which I haven't used for ages. I thought I'll shove the macro on that, and then I don't have to swap lenses around, and it's fine. And I used it, and I thought, I don't know why I'm bothering. I don't know what I don't. I much prefer the Z9. I don't really want to use the 850 anymore because it's that much better. So yeah, it's kind of redundant for me now, the 850.
I have 3 850s still, and I have 2 Z9s, but my 850s I use when I'm out on the water and it's like crappy conditions. There's spray going everywhere, fish scales flying around. My 850s are my clunkers. Yeah. They still shoot great pictures, but having that mirrorless camera where you can look through the electronic viewfinder and see exactly what you're getting is
game changer.
Yeah,
game changer.
It's awesome. But
the salt spray's a killer, though, right? I mean, if you get that over your it's I've had some problems.
I can't. I've ruined a lot of cameras, but they're replaceable.
They're a tool of the job, aren't they? I mean, that's the reality of it.
Z9, for me to drop a Z9 in the water hurts a lot more than dropping a 850.
Tell me about it. Well, I said I've told this story before, but I think within a week or two of getting the Z9, I had it over the side of the boat in Shetland with a wide angle lens on it, with these gannets coming in, and literally, Josh, they're like almost brushing your shoulders with their wings. Right? I mean, they're coming in and they're just like a foot from the cat, and they're soaking the thing with salt water. And I'm just thinking,
yeah.
But anyway,
I mean, it is what it is, but you should use your 850s as clunkers.
Yeah, I know, but I wanted to use it.
They're not water sealed. I can tell you that the Z9s are not weather sealed.
Yeah, and you don't know too. Like I'll put my camera away and I'll go to it the next day, and then I start to see all of
Salt crystals and
yeah,
rust. All my 850s are like the metal parts of the camera.
especially
They're all
the flash shoe. I mean, it's always
it's all rusting. But hey,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
One of my 850s, I have 975,000 shutter actuations on it.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's a lot.
I sent it in to Nikon for them to clean it, and they send you like a report back for your camera and like whatever how it's functioning. They like highlighted that and circled it. They're like, "Wow, this camera's had a rough life." They're almost supposed to last 200,000 shutter actuation.
I was going to say, how's it lasted for so long? That's pretty impressive.
It's just a tank. And
yeah, I think that was the best DSLR ever, the DA50. Even as a Canon shooter, I think that was the creme de la creme. I would take that over the D5, and that D6 was kind of like,
no, definitely.
Yeah.
No,
exactly. One thing with gear, just really quick, you were talking about the books that you've put out over the years, Jane. You do a lot of printing. I see that. I think you print I think you have a big Epson printer from what I've seen. Resolution when it comes to taking images to print. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how much resolution do you want? How much is too much? How much is enough? I talk to a lot of wildlife photographers, and they want as much resolution as possible, but they walk up, 2 inches from the print and they're looking at it. No one looks at a print that way, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
I found the Z9 and the 850 are both in like the 40 megapixel range. So they're both comparable in terms of sensor size. I've made prints up to like 20 feet wide from a D750. I mean, like you said, if you get closer, you're going to notice the resolution is lacking at that size. But, if you're looking at a print from further away, then, like you said, nobody's going to go up and like look at it with a microscope or a magnifying glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I found that for printing, like I would say the average large print that I do is about like a 40x60, 2:3 aspect ratio, the native format of the camera. For a 40x60, I can get a pretty clean print from, a sharp image out of the Z9 or the 850 without having to go through like any sort of like sharpening process, like topaz denoise, something like that. And I will put an image through topaz or like Photoshop, like the camera raw denoise process, if it needs it before I print it. But I don't do that with every image by any means.
Do you use like gigapixel upsizing, where you upsize the image for large, especially if you're doing 40x60, or do you feel that's not even needed?
So how I enlarge, and this is how my dad taught me to do it, because he did a lot of printing too. On Photoshop, I'll increase the size of the image at 10% increments. So that's a way to increase the size of the image without losing any quality. So I won't go from like let's just say 9:12. I won't go from a 9:12 to directly to a 40x60. I create an action on Photoshop that I just click increase size at 10% until I get to that size that I need to print. And it seems to work fine.
Okay.
But I mean, I will use Topaz Gigapixel for like my drone stuff. I'm shooting with a Mavic 2 Pro, and I'll put a drone image through Gigapixel, and it seems to work really well at like making just tightening it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Make it look like much higher resolution than a 20 megapixel image.
And do you sharpen after you upsize? I know some people, they make some, in my opinion, they'll sharpen and then upsize. And I find in my experience that I'll sharpen whatever the final size is. I won't sharpen before I change anything. Any thoughts on that? Have you experienced anything when you're doing prints?
I would typically sharpen like initially before upsizing.
Okay.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like Josh, I'd do it the other way.
Yeah. And there's no right way to do it,
Exactly. As long as it looks right and you're not like over sharpening or over editing, I think as long as it looks fine, that's my theory behind it.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a fascinating discussion, Jay. So thanks for coming on and sharing all these sort of insights into into your method of photography, and there's discussion around the sort of conservation aspect of it and the storytelling. I think it's been fascinating, and I hope people have have enjoyed that discussion. Jay, where can people sort of find out more about you? Sort of website addresses, and we'll link all of those in the show notes, obviously. But Instagram, whatever. Where can people find you?
My website. Honestly, I shoot so much. I'm so focused on constantly creating new material that my website doesn't have a lot of my new work on it. But Instagram and Facebook are great places to see my work, and see what I'm currently doing. Like Instagram has a lot of that. I've got a couple videos on YouTube and some videos on Instagram that kind of show more about my process and explain, like you mentioned, the picture of the house on Holland Island.
Yeah.
So stuff. The videos will kind of give people a better idea of like my thought process.
Yeah. And so your Instagram handle is
J Fleming Photography.
Right. Okay.
J-A-Y Fleming with one M.
Yeah. So people go and check Jay out on Instagram, and do actually check him out on YouTube as well, because some of those videos are just fascinating watches, and they're what I like about them as well is they're relatively short. You've captured sort of 5 minutes, told a bit of a story, and then you're on to the next one, which actually I think is a very clever way of doing it. But some of those, I mean, I said that house, the image of the house with a reflection, honestly, everybody, you got to go and have a look at that, because that's pretty amazing. I was kind of blown away by that
picture. That picture will outlive me for sure.
Yeah. And then you had another one. Was it a striped bass? The other picture, and you've got underwater as an underwater image.
Striped bass, rockfish, and a crab.
Yeah.
Like striped bass with a crab.
Yeah. So that's a pretty impressive picture as well. So go and check Jay out, and have a look at his website, have a look at the YouTube channel and Instagram, and get inspired. Get inspired by some of that work. So Jay, what's next for you? What are you working on next?
Well, I just finished up my series of Smith Island workshops. I was out there for a month, and then I finished a workshop yesterday out of Wachapreague, Virginia, where Josh was recently. So
I love that area.
Wildlife down here, and I've got about a month off before my next series of workshops starts. So maybe a little R&R, but usually my R&R involves going somewhere and always taking my camera. So that's
busman's holiday, is it?
That's the downfall of turning your passion into a job, is that you're constantly working. But hey, I love it.
Yeah. And of course we have quite a few listeners that live in your area too. So I'm sure there might be a few of those that might want to look you up and possibly book on one of your workshops, because that sounds like a hell of an experience.
The workshops, one of my students said that they sell out faster than the Taylor Swift concert, which it might be true, but I have a limited number of spaces. But I'm all booked for this year. I do small trips, small groups.
Yeah.
I have a boat that can accommodate 6 passengers, so it's a really kind of a one-on-one experience. I don't like to take out scores of people.
Yeah.
I'd rather just work with people individually as much as I can. And I'll be releasing dates for next year pretty soon. Actually, my Smith Island dates are out for 2025, so that's the only availability that I have right now. But if you're interested at all in wildlife in the region, the culture of the Chesapeake Bay, Smith Island is not to be missed. It's an awesome trip.
Yeah, sounds fascinating.
And the light is amazing. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I've had shitty light all my life shooting. Down here, it's a whole different story. Yeah.
Wide open vistas of the marsh, and just incredible scenes that are like classic Chesapeake Bay. Yeah. So if you want to get out with me, Smith Island, that's what I have open right now. You won't.
So Josh, you'll be booking on, won't you?
Yeah, I'd love to go out and shoot with Jay. So maybe we'll make that happen.
Yeah. Maybe I'll come over as well. We'll do it together.
Yeah. Let's do it.
One of my spots now, the boat bow spot. So
yeah. I was going to say
he'll be after all your secrets, Jay. That's the thing about Josh.
That's all right. I'm
all your little secret places.
Yeah.
And he'll take his own kayak out there.
If I was worried about secrets, I wouldn't do workshops. But I'm past the point of having to worry about secrets.
I'm pulling both your legs, as you obviously realise. Anyway, Jay, it's been fascinating to chat. So thanks so much for coming on. And as I said, I hope everybody enjoyed that and got something out of it. So, what's next for us? I think probably another guest, Josh.
Yeah.
So
We've
if
got
we
a couple
can,
things lined up, yeah,
I just got to organise them. That's the trouble, and find a slot where everybody can, time everybody can do. But anyway, so that's probably what's next. But Josh, anything else? Any other plans? I know we only spoke last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, shorebirds are coming back. Matter of fact, where Jay's at now, down near Wachapreague, I'm going to try to make my way down there again in a couple of weeks. There's, mass migration coming down, whimbrels and stuff like that. So, Cedar Island, there's skimmers nesting, terns and stuff like that. Yeah. So
oyster
it's
catchers. There's a spot down here where I took my group. It's I'll kind of be a little secretive about this because it's so good, but it's a nesting colony of egrets, herons, ibises. There's like 7 different species of wading birds nesting there.
I saw tricolored white. Yeah, they're packed in too. It looked
if you
pretty
want to
wild.
come down, let me know. I'll take you out. I got a brand new boat down here that I just had built for me. Like, I don't know, I picked it up last week. But it's an incredible spot with a ton of nesting birds. And like I said, most of these spots are pretty remote where, a lot of photographers can't get to. So happy to take you out.
Yeah, I've kayaked down there, and it can get a little dicey too. And you got to know the area, because I've got a small skiff, but it's very shallow down there. You could easily get,
Don't get caught in shallow water with a falling tide. That's all I'll say. Because you'll end up spending more time than you want to out with the birds.
Yeah, you have a nice sunburn after 4 hours. 6 hours.
Anyway, on that note, leaving everybody high and dry. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you've enjoyed that, and thanks Jay for coming on again. And
no problem.
We'll see everybody in the next one.
Thanks all.
See you.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.